All right, I think the numbers are starting to plateau, so we will go ahead and get started. I wanted to thank you all for joining us today for the 2022 CGA Women's Golf Summit. If you have any questions, there is a Q&A feature at the bottom, so feel free to click on that and enter it into the chat. Unfortunately, we cannot see you or hear you, but it'll probably be for the best so we can keep these things moving. We do have a brief period of time to get this through, but any questions that don't get answered today, please email them to us and we will certainly get around to them. And if you do have a question that is related to something that Lewis is talking about, go ahead and put it in the chat and we'll try to answer it in a timely manner rather than wait for them all at the end. But like I said, if we don't get around to your question, we certainly will get that answered. And with that, I wanted to introduce the new CGA Director of Competitions. This is Lewis Harry. He comes to us from the PGA section in Philadelphia, and he's originally from New Mexico and went to New Mexico State University. We are very excited for him to join the team. And please welcome Lewis Harry. He's going to take the lead for the rest of the session and answer any questions you may have.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro, Matt. I'll go ahead and I'll share my screen now. So we'll pop our PowerPoint up here. Matt, are we good on PowerPoint? Looks good on the screen there.
I can see everything. Please let me know if you're unable to hear Lewis. I will do my best to turn up our volume just to make sure all of your volumes are turned up on your computers.
Awesome. So before we jump in, just wanted to say thank you for everyone for answering our pre-seminar questions. That kind of helps help dictate how we do this PowerPoint and what kind of information gets put in this PowerPoints. So by answering those pre-seminar questions, kind of got an idea of what type of local rules some people use in their clubs or leagues or at their home course, if they are using some sort of model local rules at all, or any kind of situations that may be helped or fixed by local rules. So some of those questions or some of those answers that you submitted from those pre-seminar questions kind of helps filter in some of this information we're going to go over here in the next hour or so. So we'll give a little bit of an overview of our discussion here, what we're going to be talking about. So we'll talk about what are model local rules. So as we all know, there is a standard set of the rules of golf, but there are some situations that may not be in those standard rules. So we have these things called model local rules. Anytime going forward here in our discussion, when we refer to a model local rule, we'll probably be referring to it as an MLR. I know a lot of people in the rules world like to abbreviate things, and you've probably heard many abbreviations before, but just for the sake of simplicity, anytime we're talking about an MLR, we're referring to those model local rules. We'll talk about how to implement them in your club or your league, or maybe you don't know how to actually put a model local rule into effect. So we'll go ahead and talk about that. Talk about some common model local rules that might be useful for your league or your club, or like I said, if there was a situation that you answered one of those questions that you thought could be resolved by the use of a model local rule, we'll talk about some of those. Some of the ones that people did talk about in those questions, we definitely will talk about those. Talk about committee procedures and some suggestions for those committees in those leagues. And this is mostly about just general league play or some casual play, but we'll talk about some procedures that a league committee can take when we're talking about the rules. And we'll leave some time at the end for questions. If we don't get to your question during the actual presentation, we'll of course leave some time at the end just to talk about some general questions, or if you think of something else that you didn't think of before, like I said, we'll leave some time at the end of our discussion for that. So let's jump into it. Let's talk about our first bullet point. What are model local rules? So again, we have these things. We have this standard set of rules of golf, rules 1 through 24 that we cover in the rule book. But again, we have these specific situations that may or may not have already been addressed by rules 1 through 24. Either they haven't been addressed, or maybe there's an alternate part of that situation where we need an additional rule to address it further. We have these things called model local rules that deal with those specific situations for competitions. Anytime we're dealing with a model local rule, you can find those model local rules in the official guide to the rules of golf. If you have either the player's edition to the rules of golf or just the standard book size full text rules of golf, you won't find model local rules in there. You'll have to find them in the official guide to the rules of golf. If you don't have one of these official guides to the rules of golf, not a bad idea to pick one up if you don't have one already. But if you don't have one and you don't want to pick one up or you don't know where to get one, you can always go to the USGA's website under the rules tab there. Model local rules are under those full text of the rules of golf on the USGA's website. So there's many ways you can find them. The simplest way would be either through the USGA's website, kind of browsing through there, or again, if you have that official guide to the rules of golf, you'll find them in the back section of that book. So model local rules are only authorized if they're consistent with the principles outlined in our committee procedures. So what we know is that, like I said, we have the standard set of rules of golf, 1 through 24. And then in addition to that, we have our model local rules and committee procedures. Well, we can't put in a model local rule that goes against either the rules of golf or it contradicts something that already exists in the book, or it's something that a committee shouldn't do. So anytime we implement a model local rule, it should be consistent with what a committee should be doing as one of their procedures, or it should be consistent with the existing rules of golf. On our local rules, like I said, that we can't be breaking the rules of golf, or we can't alter an existing rule of golf to fit our needs better. The rules of golf exist, so we're all playing by the same rules, and we're all governed by those same standard set of rules. So our model local rules are only altering them to take care of something that they don't already take care of. We can't knock down penalties. If penalties exist, we can't waive penalties, of course. So again, those model local rules exist only to alter situations to fit specific things better. So anytime you put in an MLR to use, you're always encouraged to use the recommended text in the MLRs. The USGA and the RNA have done a really good job when they've built out all these model local rules. They've done a really good job of making that text pretty clear and concise on how those local rules are supposed to be implemented and what they're all about. So anytime you use them in your league, or maybe you want to put some model local rules in your league guidelines or anything like that, it's recommended that you use that text that's already existing in the book. There's really no need to rewrite a model local rule if you're going to use it. If a model local rule fits your specific situation and you think it can help absolve some things that are in your league, just go ahead and use the model local rule the way it's written. That's the best thing to do. Like I said, the USGA and the RNA have done a really good job of writing those model local rules to fit those specific situations. So it's always encouraged that you use it the way that text is kind of spelled out in the book. And anytime you use those model local rules, we should always make sure that all the competitors in that league or that specific competition, we should make sure that they're aware of those model local rules. If you've played in any CGA or CWGA events in the past, you'll probably know that you get a notice to competitor sheet on the tee or anytime before you start competition. That notice to competitor sheet really lays out what's called the terms of the competition. So it talks about the format, talks about certain things that players can do on the golf course, talks about certain rules that may be in effect. So anytime that we have model local rules in effect, we really should, we as the committee, we really should ensure that all the players in our league or our club or that specific event, we should make sure that those players are fully aware of what model local rules may be in effect. Like I said, it doesn't have to be on a notice to competitor sheet like the CGA does for our events. It can be emailed out. It can be in some sort of rules of the league or some sort of league guidelines that are available to all competitors. As long as those competitors are getting that information and have that information before the competition begins, that's all that is asked of committees, to make those competitors aware. So a few principles for model local rules. We kind of talked about what they are and what they're all about. We'll talk about a few principles for MLRs. So when we implement a local rule, it has the same status as a standard rule of golf. So we talk about those standard rules, rules 1 through 24. But when we implement a model local rule into our leagues, it has the same status as one of the standard rules of golf, whether it's for that entire league or just for that specific competition. That local rule is treated as a standard rule when it's implemented. Sometimes we implement a local rule just because of a temporary situation. Sometimes, whether it's an abnormal course condition, something on the course that comes up that's not always there, or if it's just something for that specific day, maybe something weather related, or something that doesn't normally exist when we play our leagues or our competitions. Maybe it's just something that's a one-off event. We can implement a local rule for one-off events if it's a temporary situation. But as soon as that temporary situation goes away, or it's no longer applicable to our league or that specific day or competition, we should take that local rule out of effect. Anytime, like I said, when it's done for a temporary situation, it should only be done for that temporary situation. We shouldn't let it exist longer than it needs to. Once that situation is gone, we'll take care of it. That local rule won't exist anymore. And again, like I mentioned in our previous slide, when we're implementing these model local rules, we're doing it in accordance with the rules of golf. We're not implementing a local rule to waive or modify an existing rule or to reduce a penalty or to add on to additional penalties. We're doing it to address a situation that may fit our needs better or may address a situation that's not already in the rules of golf. So we're doing it in accordance with those standard rules, rules 1 through 24, and we're doing it in addition to those rules. And unless otherwise stated, for the most part, 99 times out of 100, when we breach a model local rule under our league and our competitions, when we breach those rules, we're going to get the general penalty. And that depends what kind of form we're playing. If we're playing match play or stroke play. And this goes just in general for the rules of golf. When we're playing under rules 1 through 24, anytime we get the general penalty, it's going to be 2 strokes in stroke play, or it's going to be a loss of hole in match play. And again, most of the times, 99 times out of 100, when we breach a model local rule, something that's been put into effect, we're going to get the general penalty for that breach of that model local rule. A lot of times when we do breach a model local rule, it's usually in a breach of something else. We're usually playing from a wrong place. We do something else that would have got us the general penalty anyways during normal play. So it kind of goes back to that being consistent with the principles of those standard rules of golf. So real quick, we don't have to spend a ton of time on this particular slide, but just want to go over it so everyone is kind of aware of how the model local rules are structured. Again, going back to our previous slide, finding those model local rules, if we're in our official guide to the rules of golf book, we're finding those in the committee procedures section, and section 8 in committee procedures. That's where all of our model local rules are going to live within that official guide to the rules of golf. So in our model local rules section, we have all of our model local rules kind of broken down into specific areas. Those specific areas of model local rules kind of group them depending on what type of situation they're addressing. We can kind of see that there's a few of these. Section 8B talks about penalty areas. Section 8E might talk about a special or required relief procedure that we're not used to. All these different sections, all the model local rules that live in those sections, they're going to talk about that specific situation that they're addressing. So anytime that we're finding a model local rule, we're going to go find it in one of these specific sections.
Hey, Lewis, before you continue on, I do have 2 questions I think we can address now. The first one is, we are planning to implement local rule B-3 for one of the holes we play. Is there any time when you know for sure you're in a penalty area that you can be allowed to hit a provisional ball?
So when addressing that, so when we know that our ball is in a penalty area, so we either know, so we have known or virtual certain. So we either know that our ball is in a penalty area, right? So we either see it go in, see it splash, or we have confirmation from another player that that ball entered that penalty area, or we're virtually certain, right? We don't know specifically that that ball went in there, but we have 95% certainty that that ball entered a penalty area. When we know that, we have to proceed under Rule 17. So we have relief procedures under Rule 17 for penalty areas. We have to proceed under that specific rule. Anytime that we're not sure that a ball is in a penalty area, if we have some sort of thought that it could be lost outside that penalty area, maybe it goes in the direction of a penalty area, but we can't visually confirm, or we have some sort of doubt that it could be somewhere else on the golf course. In those situations, we can hit a provisional. I'm just flipping to my guidebook for model local rule B3. I don't deal with a lot of the B model local rules very often in high level competition. So I have to kind of refresh myself on B3 a little bit. Just give me 1 second here. So I'd have to specifically on B3, I'd have to get back to you a little bit more on that to do a little more reading. But normally under normal play, once we know we're virtually certain that our ball is in a penalty area, our only option would be to proceed under Rule 17 to take our penalty relief there.
And feel free to follow up with us afterwards if that didn't answer your question in full, and that way we can make sure we follow up. But the next question, does any of this apply to casual and or non-competitive play?
Sure, yeah, it does. So anytime you're just casually playing or non-competitive play, and I think I've mentioned this probably in a slide going forward, maybe later in the PowerPoint, but anytime we're in casual or non-competitive play, we are our own committee. So we can kind of decide how we would like to proceed, how a committee would proceed. We can decide as our own committee how to put in model local rules or what model local rules we're going to use. In casual play, when we're amongst friends, like I said, our group, we are serving as our own committee. We're not restricted by a committee that's already set for us. So, in casual play, if all the players agree and we can kind of come to an agreement on what type of rules we want to play under and what type of local rules we want to implement into our casual play or amongst our group of friends, we can do that. That's kind of the beauty of golf. Like I said, we have a standard set of rules to play in, and then above that, we can start making our own choices about model local rules.
Thank you, Lewis. Those are the questions that we have for now, so feel free to move along.
Can I get back to it here? There we go. We'll jump into our next topic here. So how to implement these model local rules for your league, club. Again, for casual play, when we are our own committee or we're just amongst a group of friends, implementing them that way, we're just going to implement them as an agreement from all players. When we're in a little bit more of a formal setting where everyone's playing in a league or part of a club, or maybe it's just for one specific event, we're going to try, we're really going to try and set those terms of the competition some way. Like I said, if you've played in a CGA event, you're probably familiar with one of two documents. You're probably familiar with what I mentioned earlier, a notice to competitor sheet, which you would get on the first tee or wherever your starting hole is for a shotgun. Or you also might be familiar with the CGA hard card. The diagram on the screen there is a screenshot of what the CGA hard card looks like. And that's the hard card essentially lays out terms of the competitions across all CGA events. Now, these are things that are going to be in effect for all CGA events that you play in, no matter what. And you'll notice on the right-hand column of that hard card is a list of model local rules. Now, for CGA events, and when our events are governed by our hard card, all of those model local rules are going to be in effect for that specific, for all those CGA events, unless they're altered by some sort of wording on our notice to competitor sheet for that competition. Again, for your league or club, you don't necessarily have to create a hard card like the CGA has, but it is helpful for some of your league events if you have some sort of terms of the competition or conditions of the competition that all players are aware of. Now, again, you don't have to give this out at every event. You don't have to email it every time you guys play or every time that you get together on a certain day of the week. But as long as it's something that everyone has access to and everyone can get the information from, it's a good idea to have those things laid out in writing. And this, this document's outlining all the supplemental rules we're going to be using across all competitions. Of course, all of our competitions are governed by the standard rules of golf, and then altered by or in addition to our standard or our local rules in terms we've set out in that document. It's never a substitute for the rules of golf. So whether you have some sort of conditions of the competition or not, or you have some sort of document in your league like this, it's never a substitute for the actual rules of golf. The rules of golf 1 through 24, they're going to exist no matter what. Those are the standard rules that we've been set before us. Those are the rules that govern our play. Anytime we set these local rules or our terms of the competition, this is just, again, this is just supplementing what the rules have already laid out for us. And we can also create that notice to competitor sheet that either applies to our specific competition or a series of competitions. For casual competitions, for leagues, for ladies club, a weekly game, I think going with a notice to competitor sheets or something like this that lays out those terms that you can kind of reuse over and over again, week to week, that would probably be the best way to go about letting players know of those local rules that may be in effect, or some of those terms that you use in your competitions. So jump into some common or popular model local rules. And these were some of the ones that, again, in those pre-webinar questions that we sent out, a lot of you responded with some of the ones that you either already have implemented in your league, or some you may already have it implemented, or maybe some members of your league aren't sure of it, or they're maybe don't have the full understanding of it. Or maybe you think it could help your league and you haven't implemented it yet, and then you just want to know more or how it could apply to your specific league. So a couple ones, talk about model local rule B2, relief on the opposite side of a red penalty area. This was, for anyone who is familiar with the rules of golf previous to 2019, there was a fourth option for a red penalty area under the rules of golf, under Rule 20, the old Rule 26. That old option has gone away, but has been reintroduced as a model local rule. Possibly could be of use for some of your clubs or courses that have a lot of red penalty areas. Whoops. Talk about MLR D3. So sometimes, as we all know, there's situations out there where our ball lies on a wrong green, or maybe our ball doesn't lie on a wrong green, but maybe we have a foot on a wrong green when we're preparing to play for a shot. We have a model local rule that can prohibit wrong green relief when our stance is interfered. In addition to that rule, we also have a model local rule that if our courses have a double green, or maybe we have two holes that share a green, we can divide that double green into two separate greens to address that above situation with wrong green relief. We'll talk about preferred lies. Preferred lies affects all sorts of different competitions, all the way down from casual play, all the way up to the PGA Tour, who uses preferred lies for some competitions. So I'm sure we're all familiar with preferred lies in one way or another. It's commonly known as live clean in place in other circles. But we'll talk about preferred lies and how it might be useful for a league or a club, or maybe some days or some weeks your course got a lot of rain the night before, but you still are playing the next day. We'll talk about how we can introduce preferred lies to make our competition a little more equitable when we have those course conditions. The big one probably everyone's waiting for, and the one that we saw the most answers for league play or for casual play, or anything like that, or the most questions that came in was about MLR E5. And this is the alternative to stroke and distance relief for a ball lost or out of bounds. This is one of the new model local rules implemented when the rules changed in 2019. A lot of different opinions and a lot of different thoughts from head pros at your course or leagues that may use it. Maybe you do use it in your casual play when you're playing among friends. Maybe you don't fully understand how you actually use model local rule E5. So we'll do a little bit of discussing and do some breakdowns on MLR E5 for that alternative to stroke and distance. Talk about MLR E11, ball deflected by a power line. I'm sure we have some ladies out there who play at courses where there are power lines that run across maybe a fairway or maybe across a teeing area that a ball could possibly strike that power line. We'll talk about what we do when we have that model local rule and our ball does end up hitting that power line. A couple more here. We'll talk about E12. So ball played from outside our relief area when taking back on the line relief. As we know, back on the line relief is one of our standard options for either a ball unplayable or a ball in a penalty area. Sometimes we can get away with playing that ball from when it's outside our relief area when we use back on the line relief. We'll talk about the specific time where we can get away from playing that ball outside that relief area. A few more here. F5, we're going to talk about immovable obstructions close to a putting green. I know that comes up quite a bit. I see it all over the place where there's a sprinkler head that's right off the fringe of a putting green. Maybe our ball comes right behind it. What can we do to get relief from that sprinkler head? Relief from seams of cut turf. Somewhat this time of year, maybe your course is tearing up one of the holes, putting in some new plots of turf. By the time we get back out there and play, maybe that turf isn't healed back up again. and we can see where that turf is laid down. We'll talk about getting relief from those seams where that turf was cut down and replaced. And our final one, we'll talk about G9, replacing a club that is broken or significantly damaged. I'm sure none of us on this call have ever broken a club during our normal course of play or when we're playing around in golf out there. But just in case in our league or club play, we have a member that does break a club during a round of golf. Let's talk about how this rule can help us out and get that player a more favorable option. Matt, any Q&As or chats before we move on to our diving into rules?
Not at this time, but I will remind everybody, if you do have a question or have a comment, feel free to utilize the chat or question and answer feature, and we will get to it in a timely manner. And then we will take questions at the end if we are unable to answer it at this time. So don't forget to ask those questions, but hopefully we have some time at the end. And if we don't, feel free to email us and we'll be sure that we get those answered, but feel free to move along.
So jump into our first model local rule here. So MLR B2, this talks about relief on the opposite side of a red penalty area. So as you all know, under Rule 17.1, we have some standard options when our ball enters a penalty area. We can take stroke and distance relief. We can take back on the line relief, taking where our ball crossed that penalty area, going back as far as we want on that line. Or we can take lateral penalty relief from a red penalty area. We can take where our ball crossed that red penalty area, 2 club lengths of a relief area, no closer to the hole, dropping in that 2 club length relief area from knee height, and then playing the ball once it comes to rest in the relief area. Those are our standard options under Rule 17.1. But sometimes when we have a red penalty area, whether it's something that coincides with an out of bounds boundary or just if it makes sense where we can find an opposite point on the other side. Sometimes we need this 4th option. Again, under the old rules, previous to 2019, we had a 4th option where we could take opposite side penalty relief. Now, we don't have that standard option. We have to make sure if we're going to use it, that we're using model local rule B2 in our competitions. So it's our extra relief option. So we'll talk about this diagram here on the right-hand side. So a player hits a ball into a penalty area. It happens to cross that penalty area that's on the same side of our out of bounds. So it crosses on this right-hand side where the penalty area line kind of butts up against our out of bounds line. Of course, we know that going back on the line from the flag in that situation, it's going to put us out of bounds. So that relief option might be out. We might not be able to use that relief option. Taking 2 club lengths from that side also is going to put us on the out of bounds boundary. So again, we're not going to be able to find a spot on the golf course to be able to drop in our relief area if we take it from that side. We can always go back stroke and distance. That puts us back on the tee, but maybe a player doesn't want to go all the way back to the tee if that penalty area is down the hole far enough. So if we have model local rule B2 in effect, what we can do, again, our X here is our point where our ball last crossed that penalty area. What we can do is we can go over to point Y. Point Y is our opposite side point. Point Y is no closer to the hole. It's equidistant from our point X where our ball crossed that penalty area. From point Y, we're just going to take regular lateral penalty relief. We're going to find that 2 club length relief area that's no closer to the hole. We're going to measure it. Then we're going to drop in that 2 club length relief area on that opposite side of the penalty area. So again, if you have something like this at your course where there's a creek or there's some sort of penalty area, but then on one side is out of bounds or on the other side, you may not be able to get that 2 club length relief area if your ball enters on a specific side. This might make sense to implement for those specific penalty areas. The way the text is written, it's not recommended to apply it to all penalty areas across the golf course, because sometimes if we do that, a player can get a significant advantage if they find that equidistant points for a specific penalty area. Just really, like I said, this really only applies if we have this situation where there maybe is an out of bounds line on one side of the penalty area, or it may be difficult to get that relief area if your ball enters at a certain point. Of course, as we know, for a penalty area, we can't go any closer to the hole for our opposite point. So if our ball enters on the fairway side of the hole and we have monolocal rule B2 in effect, we can't go to the green side of the penalty area as our opposite side. Anytime we're using opposite side of the red penalty area relief, we have to find that point that's equidistant from where we originally crossed that penalty area. We can't be near the hole from our original reference points. So something to think about. Like I said, if you have, like in this diagram, if you have a penalty area at your course, or if your league commonly plays somewhere that's, you come across this situation where an out of bounds line butts up against that side, it may be helpful or help one of your league players find that relief area next time their ball ends up in that penalty area. Keep rolling here. Again, like Matt said, if we're talking about one of these and it clicks in your head that it may be somewhat useful to your league, or you think that it could solve a situation at your course, chime in. Feel free to jump in there and let me know if you have any thoughts or questions. So keep going. We'll talk about D3. This talks about when we can't get relief from a wrong green. Normally under the rules of golf, under rule 13.1F, when our ball lies on a wrong green, we're forced to take relief from that wrong green. When the ball lies there or our stance is on a wrong green, we have to find that nearest point of complete relief, no closer to the hole we're playing, and then drop in a relief area. We're not permitted to play a ball as it lies when it's on the wrong green or our stance is on the wrong green. However, there may be times to where a league feels like if a player's ball is off of a wrong green, but their foot is on the wrong green, they may feel like that relief might get them to a more favorable point and give them an advantage by taking wrong green relief. So there's times where we can prohibit that wrong green relief when only our stance lies on that green. Again, under 13.1F, we're normally required to take relief if our protected areas under the rules of golf, so our live ball, our area of intended swing, or our stance is interfered. Nice little diagram here of 13.1F. So again, player A, you see that his ball or his or her ball is on that wrong green, same with their stance. They're normally going to have to find that relief area where P1 is shown. Their feet are off that green now, and they're going to drop that ball and play from there. With this rule, again, if our ball is where P1's feet are in this diagram, so here, if our ball is lying where that feet is, but our feet might be on that green, under D3, we're not going to be able to take relief. We're going to have to play that ball as it lies. Just like model local rule B2, where we're specifying a specific penalty area that applies to our situation, if we're applying D3, it's best to apply this to a certain green on the golf course. Maybe it's, for the example, we're only applying this when your stance is interfered by hole number 15's green. So again, this model local rule really only makes sense when a player might get a significant advantage by taking that wrong green relief when only their stance is interfered. Of course, when their ball is on the wrong green, even with D3, they're going to have to take relief just like under 13.1F. But again, when a player might get a significant advantage, or they might get to a more advantageous spot by taking that wrong green relief, just when a foot exists on that wrong green, we can negate this situation by implementing model local rule D3 and requiring that player to play the ball as it lies when this condition exists. In addition to D3, this is kind of a supplementing model local rule. And again, this might apply for some of those courses that your leagues play at, or your home course where you have a double green, or maybe two courses share a green, maybe 3 and 9, both of those holes, you're using the same green. It's a large green, 2 flags on the opposite ends of that green. This is probably when you would want to apply this specific model local rule. So we're going to divide that double green into 2 separate entities, or 2 separate greens. So normally under the rules of golf, the definition of a putting green just tells us that when there are 2 holes that use a double green, or that there are 2 holes that share a green, that entire area of prepared surface, so our putting green, the area that's mowed down to a certain height, that entire area is treated as the putting green for both holes. So again, if I'm playing a certain hole, maybe I'm playing hole 3, and hole 9 shares that same green, when my ball is lying near the hole on number 9, I'm still under the rules of golf, I'm still being treated as I'm on the putting green. I can putt that ball all the way over, maybe 45 feet back over to the hole on number 3. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm treated as if I'm lying on the same green. Going back to our previous slide, maybe we don't want a player if their ball's on the fringe over by number 9, but we're standing on the 9th portion of that green. Maybe they don't want a player to get relief, or maybe some way they want to distinguish those 2 greens from each other. We can divide those 2 greens into 2 separate greens. Our example here, I took this from probably the most famous example of shared greens in the world. If anyone's played the old course at St. Andrews, they know that several holes there played to double greens. Off topic here, but a fun fact about St. Andrews, if you've never known this, for all the greens that share a double green, the sum of those 2 holes numbers always adds up to 18. So in this situation, holes 7 and 11 adds up to 18. They share a double green. So a little fun fact for you this morning while we're talking about some model local rules. But again, back to our situation here. Holes 7 and 11 at St. Andrews, they share a double green, but maybe we don't want them to share a green, or maybe we don't want them to be treated as the same green. Well, as a committee, we can find 2 points that separate that green. Usually this is done by either dots or stakes or some sort of signifying object. And we can draw a line, just like this blue line is drawn here. We can draw a line that distinguishes the 7th green from the 11th green. We can choose that. We can choose how to distinguish those 2 greens and when a ball might be lying on the wrong portion of a green. Back to what I was saying, we usually use this model local rule in conjunction with D3. Again, when we don't want players to get that wrong green relief from a wrong green, when their stance exists on that green, these 2 rules kind of work in conjunction when we need to actually identify when a player is standing on a wrong green. So preferred lies. We'll keep rolling here. I know we got some limited time, and I want to make sure we get to all of our info and leave a little bit of time here at the end. But preferred lies. Again, preferred lies, commonly known as lift, clean, and place, playing the ball up, whatever we may call it. Some people call it lift, clean, and cheats. The PGA Tour uses preferred lies, and it exists in the rules for a reason. I don't have an issue with using preferred lies. I know some people are vehemently against using preferred lies. We'll talk about when preferred lies make sense. So when our ball lies in a part of the general area, now the general area encompasses our entire golf course except for bunkers, penalty areas, and putting greens. So fairway, rough, anything like that, all part of the general area. So when our general area is cut to fairway height or less, so when we're talking about fairway, we may take free relief if we have preferred lies in effect. So if we have E3 in effect, we can take free relief by lifting. We're going to mark, lift, clean, and we're going to replace our original ball or another ball once in a relief area. So our reference point when we're taking relief from preferred lies, our reference point is always going to be the spot of a ball. Where our ball comes to rest, that's going to be our reference point. Helps if we put a tee down right behind the ball as if we're marking it. That becomes our reference points. The size of our relief area, we're going to be able to replace that ball or place that ball back in play after we've lifted, cleaned it. I put 1 club length here with an asterisk. 1 club length is the most commonly used relief area. It's already built into the rules that one of our standard relief areas is a 1 club length measured by our longest club other than our putter. For the CGA, usually when we implement preferred lies or when a competitive event implements preferred lies, we usually use 1 club length. It's one of the easiest things to measure. We just pull a club out of our bag, we measure that. There's going to be our relief area. I know some leagues use a scorecard length. Some leagues have used 6 inches from the ball. That's up to the committee. As a committee, you can decide if you're going to play preferred lies. We're going to play 1 scorecard length from that ball. We're going to place it within that scorecard length. Totally a committee procedure. Again, 1 club length, I think, just makes sense because it's already one of the standard relief areas built into the rules of golf. But we have some limits when we're choosing that relief area. We can't be near the hole, right? We can't advance our ball further than where our reference point was, where our ball lied. We have to be in the general area. Our ball, when we're taking relief from preferred lies, our ball is in the general area already. So we have to stay within that same condition. We have to be in the general area. So when we lift our ball, we clean it, and then we're going to put it back into play by putting it back down in our relief area, in the general area. We're going to take the same procedures we use for replacing a ball under rules 14.2. We're going to put the ball down. We're going to let, by our hands, we're going to let it go, and we're going to let it come to rest. Once that ball is at rest, that ball is back in play. Under preferred lies, once we put a ball back in play and we've already gone through our lift, clean, and place procedure, we can't touch that ball again until we make a stroke. We don't have unlimited tries to lift, clean, and replace that ball. We get one try at it. Once it's back into play and the ball's at rest in our relief area, that ball is untouchable until we make a stroke and go find it again. So again, when it makes sense to put in preferred lies, when it rains the night before, when our course is wet, when we have soft conditions, any time that we have conditions that might not be as normal or might not be the same as when we normally play, we can put in preferred lies. Again, this is one of those things that a committee can decide to do either the day of a competition, or they can decide to kind of implement this how they see fit. So we'll get to the one that everyone is waiting for. And this is the one that, like I said, we got the most responses on. The most people saying that this is either what they're using in their league, what they would like to use in their league. Maybe they don't understand exactly how to put it in their league or how it applies to them. So we'll talk about MLR E5, or alternative to stroke and distance for a ball either lost or out of bounds. So the one thing I will say about this model local rule, if your league is a very highly competitive league, I know for events like CGA events, very highly competitive events, or events that are super, super up there on the scale, this probably isn't an MLR that you want to implement into your league or those type of events. This is more just for casual play, leagues that are a little more lax on their competitive side, or leagues that have issues with pace of play, or leagues that have, varying abilities in their members. This is really built for those types of leagues. If you play at a CGA or a CGA women's event, this model local rule will not be as an option to use. So just keep that in mind. Where the situations where E5 may or may not apply. So purpose of this rule is, we're allowing the committee is allowing players an extra relief option when our ball is either lost or out of bounds. So when our ball is lost or it's out of bounds, we have one relief option under the standard rules of golf. Stroke and distance is our only relief option. We're going back to where we last hit a shot from, and we're taking a penalty of one stroke. So under E5, we're giving this player an alternative or a extra relief option to use, so they don't necessarily have to go back to where they last played from. And it's appropriate for general play, casual play, playing our own casual rounds, or where we are the committee of our own competitions. So under this rule, like I said, our standard relief area under the rules of golf for the most part is our one club length semicircle. But under this rule, we have a pretty large relief area. Our relief area becomes a pretty wide net where we're going to be able to drop our ball when it's either lost or out of bounds. We're going to use this option. Unlike stroke and distance, where we only get one penalty stroke for going back, we're going to get two penalty strokes for using E5. The idea about this is that with those two penalty strokes, it's recreating the concept of if a player had to use stroke and distance and then had played another stroke. So when we use stroke and distance, we know we get one penalty stroke for the penalty of a ball lost or out of bounds, and then we're making another stroke to get a ball in play. So there's essentially two strokes there. Here under E5, we're getting those two strokes. We're still getting the original penalty for a ball lost or out of bounds. We're getting another penalty stroke to essentially act as the same as if we would have made a stroke to get our ball back in play. So keep that in mind. Under standard stroke and distance, it's one penalty stroke. If we use this relief option, we're getting two. So we'll talk a little bit about our diagram here on the left. This kind of illustrates exactly what we would do if we hit a ball into an area where it's more than likely going to be lost, we're not going to find it in that prescribed 3-minute search time. And then we're going to use E5 to our advantage here. So we can see our player here, she's teed off from the teeing area. This ball follows that flight path. And that ball is that point A is going to become our reference point. That may or may not be where the ball is actually lost and lies on the golf course, but that's going to be where our best estimate is of where that ball may be lost or maybe on the golf course, but we might not be able to find it. So A is going to become our ball reference points. We're going to need to create another reference point to create our relief area, right? I mentioned our relief area is going to be a pretty wide area where we're going to be able to drop our ball in. We're going to need to create a second reference point. That's going to become our fairway reference points. We're going to come out to the edge of the fairway, our nearest point of the edge of the fairway. It's going to be no closer to the hole, right? We can't advance any further to the hole when we're picking reference points. So we're going to find an equal point out to the fairway, and that's become our fairway reference points. Between these 2 points, we're going to get 2 club lengths on either side of those points, as illustrated here. We get 2 club lengths from our ball reference point from point A. We get 2 club lengths from point B in the fairway. Going back from those 2 club lengths, that's going to create our relief area. That's really going to be the area that we're going to be most focused on. So going back from those 2 points, those 2 club length areas, anywhere behind those 2 points, we're going to be able to drop a ball in. That's going to become our relief area. We can use that whole relief area to our advantage, where it might give us the best line to the flag, where it might give us, the best lie. That's going to be up to the player, where they're going to want to drop in that relief area. So just keep in mind that when we're using E5, we not only have a ball reference point, but we have that fairway reference point. We're going to need to create both to get our full relief area where a player is going to be able to drop their ball in. Right. One caveat before we move on to how we apply this to a ball out of bounds, but one caveat is we can't use this local rule for an unplayable ball. When we have an unplayable ball, usually we find that ball, we're going to have to identify that ball when it's unplayable. We don't have E5 as an option for an unplayable ball. We're going to have to proceed under Rule 19 for an unplayable ball. We have certain options that are available to us for that specific situation, so we can't use this alternative for an unplayable ball. Same thing applies when we know or are virtually certain that our ball is in a penalty area. When we have that confirmation that our ball exists in a penalty area, our only options are under Rule 17.1. We have those options available to us. E5 is not an option for when our ball is in a penalty area.
Hey, Lewis, before we move on, I just wanted to remind people we do have 5 minutes left. If you have any questions or anything, feel free to submit them now, and hopefully we can get to them. If we don't, we'll be able to reconvene afterwards and email Lewis any questions that we have following the summit. So we got 5 minutes left. So let's see what you got, Lewis.
Yep. Speed through a few more slides here until we get to the end. So let's take a look at how this applies to a ball out of bounds. Same auto local rule, E5. Instead of a lost ball, we're going to see how this applies to a ball out of bounds. So the ball reference point is going to change a little bit. In our lost ball situation, we are estimating our reference point where that ball may have been lost. For here, we're going to create that reference point where that ball crossed the boundary of the golf course. So in diagram A, we see that our ball crossed that boundary at a certain point, left the property, it's out of bounds. That's going to become our ball reference point, is that point where it went out of bounds. Same procedure as our previous slide. We're going to go out to our nearest point in the fairway to create our fairway reference point. We're going to get our 2 club lengths from there. And that's how we're going to create our relief area. In this situation, as you can see, our relief area is still, it's going to be a little bit different. It's constricted by the boundary of the golf course. Of course, we can't go out of bounds for a relief area. We have to drop the ball in bounds, but we're still getting that 2 club lengths into the fairway and then backwards to create our relief area. So we're still getting a pretty large, sizable relief area where we might be permitted to drop our ball in. But it's not all that different. We're still creating those 2 reference points. We're still getting 2 club lengths from the sides of those reference points. In this case, for ball out of bounds, we're only getting it on the fairway side. Then we're creating that somewhat triangle shaped reference point as far back as we want to go and dropping anywhere within that general area. A lot of this here just kind of explains kind of the same thing in standard relief procedures, our ball reference points, can rest on the course or last cross our edge, fairway reference point, closest edge to the fairway, no nearer the hole. Again, fairway means any area of grass in the general area that's cut to fairway height or less. Remember, under the rules of golf, the general area doesn't distinguish between rough and fairway. It's all considered the general area. But in this case, we're considering that area of fairway to be cut to fairway height or less. And then our relief area is going to be anywhere between our line from the hole through point B, line of the hole through point A. It's going to create that triangle area or a triangle sized relief area. And then a line of the hole from our 2 club lengths. Remember, we can use that area that we created with that 2 club lengths from our fairway reference point. That area is still part of our permitted dropping area. So Matthew said we're running low on last couple of minutes here, but I'll speed through 2 more local rules I want to get to. The ball's deflected by a power line. We probably play courses like this all the time where a teeing area might be affected by a power line. You can implement a local rule that gives the player the option to replay, we shouldn't be implementing this local rule that gives the player the option. When we have this local rule in place, when a player hits a ball and is struck by a power line, that ball should be canceled. That stroke goes away and we're going to replay that shot. If we don't, we're going to be treated as if we played from a wrong place. When we hit that power line, we're going to get the general penalty in that scenario. So when we have this model local rule in effect, we hit that power line. Maybe it's on a tee shot, maybe it's from a shot in the fairway. We're going to cancel that stroke. That stroke is going to go away and we're going to replay that stroke from where we last played from. Might be helpful if you have a teeing area like this where a power line goes right up on that tee area. Could give the player an option to, or could help out a player, not give them the option, but could help out a player. I know we're running low on time. E12, I wanted to get to it, but it's not super relevant to what we're talking about here. The one I want to get to that could be useful for your specific scenarios here is G9. This is the last one we'll talk about today. Again, any questions, we'll try and answer them real quick before we end, or we'll address them later. But last thing I want to talk about today is model local rule G9, replacing a club that is either broken or damaged. So what this model local rule does is it alters what a player might be permitted to do with their equipment normally. So rule 4.1 covers a player's equipment and clubs pertaining to that equipment. Normally, when we either break a club or damage it, when we are the person who damages it, right? Not when an outside influence, another player, not when natural forces damages it, but when we are the cause of the damage, either by a stroke, leaning on it, putting it in our bag. So when a player is the cause of damaging a club, normally we can't replace that broken club. If a club is damaged and becomes damaged during play and we're the cause of it, we can keep using that club. We can continue to use it throughout the round until our round is over, but we can't replace it under rule 4.1b. Or if it's a stroke play playoff, stroke play playoffs are new rounds under the rules of golf. It's a brand new round. We would have to take that club out of play for a stroke play playoff. But for our normal round, we can continue using a damaged club, just not being able to replace it. What model local rule G9 does is it allows us to replace that club when it's broken or significantly damaged, even when we are the cause of the damage or our player or our caddy is the cause of the damage. If we do that in the case of abuse, right? If I do it in anger, if I snap a club over my leg, I hit my bag and it breaks another club in my bag, or I hit a tree. In those scenarios, I would not be able to do this. But if I hit a ball and a stroke causes that club to break, or I put it, or I'm leaning on it, and as I'm leaning on it to put a tee in the ground, it snaps. Model local rule G9 allows the player to replace that broken club. It gives us that option to put a new club into play, taking that broken club out of play. So real quick, when is a club considered damaged or broken? So when the shaft breaks into pieces, it splinters or is bent, right? And maybe a steel shaft could be bent. When the club face is visibly deformed or damaged, not necessarily scratched, as we know, our clubs get scratched as we use them, but when the club face is actually visibly deformed or damaged, like this club here, we can see clearly that club is visibly damaged, that club under model local rule G9 is going to be permitted to be removed from play and replaced. Or when the club head gets detached or is loose or the grip comes loose. These are all things when a club is considered damaged and is eligible to be replaced under model local rule G9. So keep that in mind. If you don't have this already in your league or implemented for your clubs or specific competitions, just keep in mind that if you do break a club out there on the golf course, you can continue using it. The 4.1b is not going to let you replace that club unless this model local rule is implemented into play. So could be something you want to think about. I know it doesn't happen often that we break clubs or clubs break during the normal course of play, but next time a club does break and you have this in your league, could save someone down the line and give them that option.
Well, thank you very much, Lewis. Before we do have 3 questions, but before we get to that, I wanted to let you guys know that the next sessions are Golf Genius 102 and different forms of play. Lewis and I will hang out for the next 5 to 10 minutes and answer the questions that are here. So we'll hang out for a little bit, but if you are getting to those next sessions, they are going to start here shortly. And like I said, that's Golf Genius 102 and different forms of play. But thank you to Lewis for those that are heading out now for going over the Get Your Local Rules here. If you have any issues getting into those next sessions, feel free to reach out to us and we will get you in there. So with that being said, the first question refers to E3. Do we use E3 preferred lie if a ball lands in a puddle of water in a sand trap?
So for E3, so we're playing under model local rule E3, and we're playing preferred lies. That rule is going to apply to the general area. So when a ball is in a sand trap, that ball is treated as lying in a bunker. So bunkers are a specific area of the golf course. They're not part of the general area. They are their own existing thing. But when we have a puddle of water in a sand trap, that puddle of water is treated as temporary water. We get relief from temporary water, whether the ball is, if it's in the general area, if a ball is in a bunker, if it's on the putting green, we do get relief from temporary water under the rules of golf. Temporary water doesn't exist in a penalty area just because penalty areas are usually made up of water anyways. So that's getting on a different topic here, but temporary water doesn't exist in a penalty area. But when we're talking about temporary water in a bunker, we do get relief from that temporary water. When either the ball is in the temporary water, our area of intended swing might be interfered by the temporary water, or our stance is in the temporary water. Our relief area is going to be usually our nearest point of complete relief. Sometimes in a bunker, we might not get complete relief. Sometimes it might happen that we're still interfered by the water in some way. But what's going to happen is we're going to take relief staying in that bunker in an area that we can find when we have as little interference from that water as possible. So in this situation for a ball in the bunker, model local rule E3 would not come into effect. You would only get lift, clean, and place relief when our ball lies in the general area. Usually to a height of fairway or less.
And with that, is there a rule that's specific to that scenario?
To temporary water relief in a bunker.
Okay.
Was that the question? Is there a rule that's
there was a
specific
follow-up
to temporary?
question. It just says which rule references water in bunker?
So for temporary water in a bunker, I believe you're going to find that temporary water is defined as an abnormal course condition. So relief from abnormal course conditions is going to be covered by Rule 16 in the rule book.
Awesome. The next question refers to obstructions around the green and kind of more curious on what the options are.
Sure. So normally when our ball lies around the green, when it's not on the putting green, our ball is still going to be treated as it's in the general area. So if it's in the fringe next to the green, if it's, it's an area that's right off the putting green, our ball is still treated as being in the general area. Now, in the general area, when we're talking about relief from obstructions, there's 3 main things we're concerned about with relief. We're concerned about the lie of the ball. We're concerned about our area of intended swing, and we're concerned about our area of intended stance. So normally for those obstructions in the general area, our line of play isn't one of the considered factors for relief. However, this kind of goes back to a slide that I wish we had time to get to, but it talks about when we have obstructions near the edge of a putting green. Now, more commonly than not, that's going to be sprinklers. Now, sometimes if we have this specific model local rule in effect, and that sprinkler does happen to be on our line of play, sometimes we do, or, we normally will get relief from that with this model local rule. As we all know, when we're around the green, whether we're on the fringe or somewhere close to the edge of the putting green, not all the time are we going to hit a shot that gets in the air. Sometimes we want to have that option to play a shot that runs along the ground or to putt it. Keeping those options in mind, that's when our line of play comes back into being a factor. If we're going to play those types of shots where they run along the ground or they kind of are not getting in the air, our line of play becomes a little more important. So with that specific, I don't know if you can still,
We can still see.
We can still see our PowerPoint here. I'll kind of go back to that specific model local rule.
And Carmen, let me know if that answered your question as well. Hopefully that answered two questions with one answer.
Yep. So for this, with this specific area, again, we're around the putting green. We're in the general area. This ball, as we can see with this line, it lies on that our line of play, and maybe going towards the hole in the general area. This player is probably going to want to putt that ball, so they're going to play a shot that goes along the ground. So our line of play is going to be affected by that type of shot. With this model local rule in effect, it's F5, movable obstructions close to the putting green. We can see that this obstruction, it's within 2 club lengths of the putting green, so it's close enough to be considered and interfered. And it's with 2 club lengths of the ball on our line. Again, it's close enough to be interfered by this shot. We're going to get relief from this particular situation with this line on the putting green. It's going to be similar relief to how we take a lot of our other relief from obstructions. We're going to find our nearest point where our conditions are not affected. So where this yellow dot is, that's not going to be on our line of play anymore. It's not going to be in our area of intended swing. We're not going to stand on it. And the ball, of course, is not going to lie next to a movable obstruction. So with this model local rule, when obstructions are close to the green and they're on our line of play where we might want to putt or chip those, and they could become a factor in that interference, this model local rule does give us interference normally where they would not give us interference. In the general area, when we have a sprinkler box in front of us or we have some other obstruction that's 10 feet in front of us and not near the green, we're not going to get relief from that obstruction because line of play doesn't normally factor in the general area. It's only in this specific situation where an obstruction is close enough to the putting green and close enough to our ball that choosing to putt that ball could become interfered. So just keep that in mind. It really only comes into effect around the putting green when it's close enough to be on that line.
Well, that is all the.
Hopefully that answered the question there.
She followed up with this local rule would not incur a penalty.
Which local rule would that be?
In regards to the sprinkler heads.
In regards to sprinkler heads, that would not be. This would be free relief, just as if you were taking it from any other abnormal course condition or movable obstruction. Free relief for this rule.
Awesome. Well, that is the last question that I had. If anybody has any last ones, feel free to email us, but we're going to let everybody get to the remaining sessions. Just wanted to thank Lewis again and welcome him to the team for doing this session for this 2022 Women's Summit. Don't forget to check out the other sessions and bid on some of those silent auction items. This session is recorded, so if you did miss the beginning of it, it will be emailed out following the conclusion of the event, probably a few days once we have a chance to compile it. Like I said, if you have any questions on the rule specifically, reach out to Lewis. You can find his information here or in the staff directory in the download section. So thank you again for joining us for this session for Get Your Local Rules here, and we look forward to seeing you on the golf course this season. Everyone have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.